everybody. Welcome to this, the second EV Summit panel discussion on World EV Day, brought to you by the EV Summit. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our online audience to this, the inaugural World EV Day on the 9th of September 2020. We have, I think, helped to build a global movement to really transition the rapid shift to e-mobility and the sustainable transport near future we all so desperately want to see. So I'm delighted to have everyone join us on this, the second EV Summit panel discussion of the day on World EV Day. This panel discussion will be on the subject of marketing and e-mobility, looking at how marketing and communications can deliver an audience, a wider audience, and greater traction and speed of take-up of e-mobility. We have a super impressive lineup of leading marketeers from across business, government, charging infrastructure, and delighted that you will all be joining us. We'll begin the session shortly. There are people joining us in numbers worldwide, so I will just wait a few minutes before we go to our first speaker, who will be Simona Di Silvestro, who is the ABB Ambassador and Test and Reserve Driver for the Porsche Formula E team. But before I open up the panel discussion, we'll just wait another minute or so as more people join us for this highly engaging subject around the subject of marketing and e-mobility. We have many hundreds of people now joining us worldwide. So thanks once again, and happy World EV Day to you all. This is the inaugural World EV Day, a project in partnership with GreenTV and with ABB as our headline partner. The other key thing is, from our online audience, please do submit questions to our speakers. This is an interactive format. I will ask each of the speakers 5 minutes of questions, and then we'll go over to 5 minutes of questions from you, our online audience. So please, if you have any questions for any of our speakers, do start posting them now. And I'll be delighted to ask our speakers those questions for you. I think then we will now begin the marketing and e-mobility panel. And I am absolutely delighted to announce a superlatively strong lineup of speakers. Our first speaker will be Simona Di Silvestro, ABB Ambassador and Test Reserve Driver for the Porsche Formula E team. Then I'll be joined by, again from ABB, Amber Putiano, who's the e-mobility solution global marketing leader at ABB. I'll be joined with Poppy Welch, the head of Go Ultra Low, the UK government's campaign body for e-mobility, by Tim Jones, the director of marketing at DPD, the UK's leading parcel delivery firm. And lastly, but of course not least, by Roni Dvir, the head of marketing at Drives on the software side for charging infrastructure. And I'm absolutely delighted to begin this conversation with a superlatively good example of how marketing communications really does drive engagement for e-mobility. I can think of no one better to lead that conversation than Simona Di Silvestro, the ABB Ambassador and Test Reserve Driver for the Porsche Formula E team. Simona, please give us an opening insight into how your work at Formula E really does help to drive wider engagement around e-mobility.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And yeah, for sure, being a race car driver, I think things changed quite a lot over the last few years with Formula E popping up, being the first fully electric racing championship. So it's as a driver, it's been quite interesting to as well, like being involved in all the development and all that. But for sure, I think with racing, it's I think it can show that electric mobility, electric vehicles can be really cool, really fast, and really entertaining. And I think that's the perfect way really Formula E did this.
From your, give me a sense of your own personal experience of how being a driver in Formula E has really engaged audiences. How do you see that engagement happening in your own world?
Yeah, I see really just the awareness really growing. Even myself, as a driver, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined that we're going racing with electric cars. And here we are, we have a product that is really cool, that is really developing like really quickly. And when I see, you know, young people now also, you know, being on Instagram or whatever, and actually, you know, showing the cars and looking at the cars and thinking that they're cool, thinking that they're fast, thinking that it's the way of the future. So it's quite special to be involved in it, and you know, just having the awareness, bring the awareness to all the people out there that yeah, electric vehicles is the future, and to be able to race and showcase that on a racetrack is quite particular.
And do you see Formula E as a way of engaging a new audience, perhaps an audience that may not have thought about an electric car? Is it a good platform, a good communications medium for engaging that new audience?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think it's quite interesting because you have the hardcore racing fans, you know, who are also a bit kind of, you know, thinking and changing their mindset a little bit, because the racing is really good in Formula E. And also, I think the younger generation, I think if I look at my generation as well, and even the younger one, we're much more aware about, you know, being green, about thinking about those things. And I think that Formula E is a perfect platform to deliver that. And yeah, I definitely see much more engagement and a lot of interest actually in it, because there's just so much development going on that you know, getting the interest and everyone kind of really seeing it. I think it's quite special to see and to witness.
You've mentioned young people a couple of times in your first two statements. Do you feel that there's a particular emphasis with Formula E on engaging young people, and that young people are particularly receptive to the Formula E proposition?
Yeah, I think they do, because I think, you know, if you look at the cars, you know, for example, with Porsche, it's quite exciting. You know, they just came out with the Taycan. None of us ever thought that a Porsche would be electric, and here it is, and it's like an amazing car. Looks really cool, and I think a lot of young people, you know, I think they, you know, if I think back when I was 10 years old and looking at the cars and seeing the products that is out there, and seeing how fast they are, how cool they are, how like stylish they are, I think it's really working well. And yeah, with Formula E being racing and all that, I think it's good to see, you know, that everything is kind of coming together. And I think yeah, a lot of young people are really interested, you know, and they're not just thinking the old way of combustion engines. They're just, you know, the new way is maybe electric, and they're totally open to that.
Very good. Good. I'll open the debate up to some questions from our online audience. The questions are now coming in, which is great. And if anybody has any further questions for either Simona or our other speakers, then please do submit those questions. I'd be delighted to ask all of our speakers some questions from the online audience. Simona, the first question is about future energy systems. Mahendra Shukla asks, please share ABB's experience in Formula E races and its impact on future energy systems. A pretty esoteric question there.
Yeah, well, you know, I think for myself, being with an ABB ambassador, you know, I'm seeing all the technology they're developing, you know, with the fast chargers and all that. And I'm not quite sure, you know, exactly where, you know, with the Gen 3 of Formula E, exactly what is going to be, if there's going to be fast charging. They haven't really decided on that, but I could see that really that ABB could be involved in that, and really, yeah, having a fast charge that we could see in the race, on the racetrack, and something that we'll be using every day in our everyday lives in 5 to 6 years. So I think for ABB, it makes a lot of sense to be involved in that, and, you know, to showcase their technology for, yeah, the way of the future, I would say, and for our everyday life.
Very good. And Max Wimmelbacher asks, how long do you think it will be before electric vehicles overtake combustion engine powered cars as a regular mode of transport for most people?
I think very soon, to be honest. I think I'm seeing, you know, everywhere I'm seeing more and more electric vehicles. I think the you know, the range is growing every time a car comes out. You know, if we look at the Taycan, the range is pretty good already. And I think all of us, even myself, you know, being really a motorhead, you know, and loving racing and fast cars, I look at it and could, you know, really think about, you know, driving electric. So, you know, I'm debating on that myself right now at the moment. So I think it's changing quite quickly, and I think it's cool to see the change. And yeah, I think it's coming quicker than we think.
Very good. a final question then before we move on to Amber from ABB. Carola Grillo says, are there any collaborations between Formula E and Formula One?
No, there is no, as far as I know, there's no collaboration. It's completely different. You know, Formula E really came in 6 years ago to be, you know, the first ever electric racing series, and really what, you know, their focus is being fully electric. Formula One is still using a hybrid system, which has nothing to do really with the complete EV, and I think it's quite different, and I think that's quite important as well to have the two differences. I think it's important to have both.
Very good. Well, Simona, thank you very much indeed for setting the scene so brilliantly with how Formula E has developed a powerful platform for communicating electric vehicles worldwide. So thanks very much indeed. Do stick around, because at the end we will invite all of the panelists to ask questions of each other. So do pay close attention to what some of the other panelists are saying, and hopefully have a great question to ask one of those other panelists. So Simona, thank you very much indeed. I am delighted now to move on to our second panelist on this eMobility and marketing communications panel. And that second panelist is Amber Putiano, who is eMobility Solutions Global Marketing Lead at ABB. Amber, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here on World EV Day.
And happy World EV Day to you. And of course, a special thank you to you for being our headline partner on the World EV Day project. It's been an absolute joy working with you. So thank you very much indeed for that.
Oh, thank you. We're proud to be part of it.
Thank you. So Amber, tell us a little bit about your world in marketing at ABB, and how you're looking to use marketing communications to engage the different audiences that you reach out to in your work.
Well, I would say, you know, ABB is really a big supporter, for example, of Formula E. And as Simona said, this is really sort of a way to showcase where we're testing the boundaries of technology. And that's really one of our objectives, is to test the boundaries of technology and to transform societies and industries in a way that is more productive and more sustainable. So this is why at ABB we've invested quite strongly in our eMobility solutions portfolio, from home chargers to the ultra fast chargers you see next to highways, and also why we've invested strongly in Formula E. And it puts the technology out there. It shows the world what we can do with electric vehicles. You can see it on TV if you're lucky enough to live in one of the 12 cities where the race actually comes to. You can see it on your city center streets. But with all of this, I still feel like, you know, there's still a large portion of the population that doesn't understand or doesn't know the benefits of electric vehicles. I, for one of them. More than a year and a half ago, I wasn't aware of this. And it wasn't until I joined the segment and joined ABB in the segment that it became, you know, more familiar to me, and I understood, and I was surprised. So when you came to me with this idea of World EV Day, it was really a no-brainer, because this is our opportunity to really share our knowledge and our experience with what electric vehicles can do for societies with a broader audience who may not be aware of it, through simple education, short video how-to videos you've seen. You might have seen also today we released a video where there's some sweet little children who are asking some really important and big questions about electric vehicles. And you've got some people who are giving really straightforward and simple answers. So yeah, I mean, we just need to, I think, find a way to get the message out to a broader population of people, and then it becomes really simple.
Well, thanks very much indeed for those opening thoughts. I suppose what you framed there is a situation where we had for 100 years or so a mode of propulsion, the internal combustion engine, and then suddenly in a very few short years, a whole new a whole new energy system has arisen and a new powertrain system with electrification. What do you think the challenges are for reaching the kind of next wave of consumers, the next wave of people, to get them to understand that, you know, the power of electrification, the joy of sustainability in transport? How do we reach this next wave of consumers, do you think?
I think we need to continue to educate. We need to continue to share the messages. I think probably we should be looking also at some different channels, leveraging some different tools. I mentioned the video that we had where we interviewed the children. In preparation for that video, I wanted to understand really where our children are in their knowledge of electric vehicles. And I was really surprised when I started interviewing some of the neighborhood kids how aware they are of air pollution and the benefits of electric vehicles, and the burning of fuel that comes from normal internal combustion engines. They didn't use the word internal combustion engine, but they were well aware that electric vehicles are good for the environment, or better for the environment. So I think trying to find ways to reach that audience, especially as they're going into their teenage years and they're getting ready to buy their own vehicles, I think we need to reach a little bit further and try new ways to reach them. For example, maybe looking at TikTok and Snapchat as alternative ways to get those messages out.
And tell me a little bit more about how we can possibly engage other harder to reach audiences, to reach out to diverse communities, to reach out to people for whom cost is maybe an issue with an electric vehicle. How do you feel within the marketing communications community we can help to communicate messages to a wider audience?
I think it's important to understand where the knowledge is today with some of those audiences. So, for example, if you see any press releases about electric vehicles or blogs about electric vehicles, usually at the end of those you see the opportunities for public comments. And it's interesting, if you start reading through some of the comments that show up in those locations, the very obvious disinformation or unknowing of electric vehicles, it's demonstrated in many of the comments. For example, I was reading one actually just recently, and one guy was saying that, I can't afford a new electric vehicle. I can only afford a used electric vehicle. It's the same way as the internal combustion engine. And he said, there's none in my city, but I can't drive to get one. I can't drive outside of my city to get one because I have to make it back to my city. And how am I going to make it back if the range is shorter than the distance from my city? And that just demonstrates that there's a knowing about how many chargers are available, public chargers are available already in many countries. So yeah, I think it's first understanding where the questions are and then really targeting our messaging to address those specific questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks very much indeed, Amber. I'll now open up some questions to our audience, and please, if you're in the online audience, do submit more questions both to Amber and to Tim and Poppy, our subsequent speakers. There's a question come in, Amber, from someone who's not disclosed their name, but they're saying, there's a problem around range with charging vehicles, and they're saying until the range issue has been sorted, it doesn't matter how much work we do in marketing communications, we need to sort out the engineering side of things and the charging infrastructure side first. Perhaps we need to do both in parallel. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I feel like the technology's come a long way. If you look at the average range of an electric vehicle now versus where it was, a few years back, it's significantly more. There's even one vehicle manufacturer that has recently released a message that they can reach 500-mile range. So range is, I think, it was a concern in the past. I think it's continuing to be used without full understanding that the technology has advanced a lot since then, and it's continuing to get better.
Yeah, so following on from that, there's another charging infrastructure question from Max, who asks about ABB's strategy and targets regarding charging infrastructure, especially across Europe. Can you disclose any targets, or is or is that not something you're happy to talk about?
What I can say is that ABB has invested really strongly, especially in Europe. You can look back in the last month and see a couple of press releases of some major facilities that we've opened in Europe. So, I mean, we're very grounded here. We are also involved in the policy making around electric vehicles and regulations around that, and pushing for further knowledge about this and sharing that knowledge widely. So I think our investments are showing very much that we're strongly committed to this in Europe as well.
There's another question coming about perception, people's perception that the technology has not advanced very much over recent years. What would your thoughts be on addressing that question of perception around the technology?
I'm not sure where the question is coming from, because I'm seeing actually just the opposite. Some years ago, I mean, we couldn't even imagine charging our cars with 50 kilowatts of power. And today we have charging up to 350 kilowatts of power for cars. And even for trucks, we can reach up to 600 kilowatts of charging power. So I think it's just sharing this information and making people more aware about where the technology has come from and where it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's that point again, that maybe the ideas infrastructure hasn't caught up with the technology infrastructure. The technology is there, right? It's just a question of us deploying great ideas, World EV Day together, to help build the ideas infrastructure to get people up to speed with where the world is heading, and heading fast.
Exactly, I agree.
Yeah, very good. Well, Amber, do stick around for questions amongst the other panel members at the end, but I'd like to thank you very much indeed now, both for your support once again with World EV Day from ABB, and for your contribution today on this marketing panel for World EV Day. So thanks very much indeed, and join you again soon. So that was Amber, the head of marketing at ABB, and I'm delighted now to hand over to our third speaker, who is Poppy Welch, the head of Go Ultra Low. Poppy, delighted to be joined by you today. Please just set the scene for us in terms of what you do in your work at Go Ultra Low, and how your role in marketing communications is key to your work, please.
Sure. Firstly, thank you very much for having me on and having Go Ultra Low on. It's a great opportunity to kind of spread the message a bit further about the uptake of EVs. So yeah, just a bit of background, I guess, on Go Ultra Low. We, as a campaign, was set up about 6 or 7 years ago as a joint initiative between the Office for Low Emission Vehicles here in the UK and the automotive industry. And over those years, we've grown quite considerably. So we now feature pretty much any automotive manufacturer in the UK who produces pure electric vehicles. And we've continued that partnership with government, of course. And we also have some members from the energy side as well. And what we're here for is to essentially, we understand that the change from petrol and diesel vehicles is quite a big change. It's a sort of big piece of behaviour change for both the general public and also businesses as well. So the campaign was set up to help people understand what it means to change and what the advantages are, and just generally give them the information that they need to make informed decisions about changing from petrol and diesel vehicles to electric. You know, they've been around for 100 years or something, I think, as someone else mentioned, and the habits that there are involved in owning a petrol or diesel vehicles are so ingrained that it can be quite difficult to sort of just easily make that switch without lots of questions. So hopefully what our campaign does is in many ways twofold. So a sort of strategy that we normally stick to is initially trying to get people interested and excited really about the technology itself and the vehicles that are available, but then also helping them with the more detailed information that they need, whether that's on costs, charging, range, the different types of charging, etc., etc. So we kind of, yeah, like I say, two phases. We want to make sure people are interested and excited by the category as a whole. And I think, as Amber mentioned, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and I think that almost a certain amount of concern and fear about making that switch. So hopefully what we're able to do is just give people that information that will make it easier for them.
Very good. Well, thanks so much for that opening gambit as to the strategy that you deploy. So moving from strategy to execution, could you give us an insight into some of the tools that you deploy to engage consumers to develop this wider excitement and understanding of electric vehicles?
Yeah, sure. So largely we are a marketing communications campaign. We do some other things as well, but we work across a number of channels. We have made the decision generally to target quite a broad audience. There's a debate we have actually internally as a team. Do we target those people who would be easy to tip over into EV ownership, or do we just target almost everybody? And we always pretty much, land on the side of trying to target a very wide audience, because we know that this is a long-term thing. It needs to happen. I say long-term, actually, perhaps this needs to happen in 10 or 15 years time, which in the grand scheme of things isn't very long. But that means that we do have to target quite a broad audience. So we generally, in our media targeting, for example, look at adults between the ages of 30 and 65, for example. That said, we're probably going to be lowering that age group. I think somebody else touched on it. Actually, the younger age groups are in many ways much more interested and knowledgeable about this technology already. I know that my 7-year-old son just thinks that cars are electric anyway. So, there are different things that you need to do for people at kind of different stages of the journey. So we do messaging to target people at different stages. But in terms of your question about tools, we generally will use quite high profile paid media channels such as TV, video on demand, digital, out of home, with those messages where we want to create that interest and excitement for electric vehicles, but then we back that up with more targeted messaging. So as I say, around the charging cost, etc., in those channels where you can be a bit more targeted. So whether that's digital, social, we do quite a lot on social, where you can obviously be a bit more comprehensive in the messages that you put across. We also do quite a lot of PR, so sort of PR events, if you like. So I don't know, it's just as a little example, at Christmas last year, we set up some electric vans to pick up people's Christmas trees on behalf of local councils and things, just to get that visibility. It's not just cars, it's vans as well, and they can kind of do all these different jobs. So that's the kind of thing that we might do. And we also attend quite a lot of events. So whether we've got kind of two-pronged event strategy as well, we know that, and the manufacturers know too, that the best way to persuade people about how brilliant electric cars are is to get them in them, to get them touching them, feeling, and then ultimately driving them. So we do a number of test drive events. And it's amazing, actually. One of them that we do is at the British Touring Car Championship, which is obviously attended by lots of people that would describe themselves as petrol heads, but we give them the opportunity to test drive a lot of electric vehicles around the track there. And the reception to them is always absolutely brilliant. They're always kind of completely shocked in a good way about how good the cars are. So we do try and do test drive events wherever possible, because they do go down really well once people have actually driven them. And then we'll also attend more sort of consumer events to help give out advice. So we might attend something like Countryfile Live or Grand Designs Live, and give people the opportunity to get advice and ask a lot of questions about what, how they can make that change to electric. So essentially, I guess my answer is that we use a lot of different channels, depending on the different messages and the people that we're targeting.
Thanks so much. I was going to ask you for some of your success stories, but I think with the electric Christmas tree and the event side, I think you've answered that question. But moving on then to another question, obviously with this year, with real world events having disappeared as an option, how have you pivoted your campaigns, your strategy, your tools with everything that's gone on this year, with the world of events, real world physical events having been taken away from us?
Well, yeah, so obviously we pretty much canned the majority of the events that we were due to attend and carry out this year, with the exception of the one I mentioned at Brands Hatch at the British Touring Car Championship. That is in fact going ahead, so hopefully it'll be as successful as previous years. But in terms of, we haven't we haven't really at the moment gone down the route of events such as this so much, you know, online events, because for us, as I was saying, we really want to get people, you know, in front of the cars, in the cars, etc. So to, you know, without going into too much detail, what we've done with that budget is invest more in our kind of above the line channels, for example. So getting people excited about EVs on TV or something like that. So we just kind of shift things around, really.
Yep, very good. So I'll open up some questions then to our online audience. And if there are any other questions from the online audience, please do submit them either to Poppy or to Tim from DPD, or from Roni from Drives as our next two speakers. But Poppy, this first question for you from our online audience is, which audience seems the most receptive to Go Ultra Low campaigns in your experience?
That's actually a really interesting question. And I'd say there were two answers. So if you look at the people that actually buy electric vehicles, interestingly, they seem to be probably over 55 actually, so an older audience. And I think you find that, you know, people potentially then that they're willing to start looking into the detail of it, finding out about the cost savings they can make. You often find, you know, they do have a bit more disposable income available to them to be able to purchase a new car for a start. And they may be from a household that has more than one vehicle. So it's, you know, it's much easier for somebody to sort of try electric if they've got two cars in that household. So I think that's potentially some of the reason behind those people being sort of more predisposed to actually purchase. That said, I do think a younger audience are just generally more sort of fully accepting of electric vehicles. There's a sort of gap in between where I think there still is quite a lot of skepticism about the technology, and where a lot of those myths and concerns do still kind of perpetuate. So it's almost like the younger and the older audience are kind of with us, but we need to tackle that middle section.
Very good, good. That's great. And another question from Kate Tyrrell asks, which platform is having the biggest impact for you in terms of engagement?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, it depends what we're looking for. So as I mentioned previously, one of the main things we're looking for is to create that interest and excitement. And you can imagine that being a campaign partly funded by government, we have to do a lot of research to show how successful our channels are. And in terms of creating, you know, that behaviour change and that excitement, probably are more high-profile channels such as video on demand, TV, up home. They probably do. Radio in particular, actually, always gives us really good results. We use Kantar to tell us kind of how people's attitudes change before and after seeing our communications, and those channels I mentioned probably are the ones that make people's opinions change for the better.
Very good. There's a question which I think you may have touched on there, but to ask it specifically, from Carola Grillo. She asks, do you use behavioral science or behavioral economics to guide you in your marketing strategy?
To a certain extent, yes. Our agencies, we work with a number of sort of well-known marketing and advertising agencies, and yes, from time to time in the strategies that we put together, there will be investigations in that area to help us. We do a lot of quite bespoke research, I suppose, to help us plan our strategies, and it's often around attitudes and what people's concerns are. But yeah, to a certain extent, we will use behavioural science in there too.
Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed for now, Poppy. Do have in mind some questions to ask of your fellow panelists at the end. But yeah, once again, thank you very much indeed for joining us for now, and speak to you shortly. Over to our next speaker, and I'm delighted to announce that Tim Jones, the Marketing Director of DPD, joins us. For our online audience, if you have any questions for Tim, please do submit those, and I will ask those on your behalf. But for now, Tim, thanks very, very much indeed for joining us on World EV Day on this marketing panel. Tim, please give us a sense of your work at DPD, and your challenges and the opportunities that you as a marketeer have for reaching the audiences that you're looking to reach.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Aid, and indeed thanks for having me here at World EV Day. It's great to be part of the programme today. So, I mean, the challenges, that we face are very diverse and probably quite different to some of the issues we've been hearing about. Obviously, at DPD, for some of our guests, we're the UK's leading parcel delivery company. We deliver now well over 60% of our parcels that would to home addresses, to private addresses. So we're talking about 280 to nearly 300 million parcels a year that we deliver. Vast majority, or the majority of those, going to private addresses and homes, and that's a 7-day-a-week operation made from 84 sites. And our big challenge this year has been to try to respond to the sustainability issues that we face, and we've seen since the advent of the COVID crisis a huge surge in online shopping and a huge surge therefore in need for home deliveries of those items. And we're trying to meet those business challenges, to meet those operational challenges, but also to maintain our primary goal, which is a fundamental part of our strategy, to be the UK's most sustainable carrier. So we can only do that by shifting very visibly our operational response to the demand in the marketplace. And that has really meant moving towards emission-free delivery. That means all electric vehicles. That means all the things that some of our other panelists have been talking about: charging infrastructure, the life of the battery, the range of the vehicles. But now we're talking about a commercial vehicle. We're now talking about a van, a delivery van, not a car, or even something as cool as a racing car that we heard about from Simona, which we're at the very opposite end now, which is about a whole different area of EVs. We're talking about commercial vehicles, replacing a traditional 3.5-ton diesel white van that would typically have 100 to 200 parcels on it in a day for delivery. Now it has to be very different. These vans are smaller, the range isn't so far, so they need to operate out of smaller sites. They take a fewer number of parcels, they deliver those parcels, they return to their new site to recharge and reload with the parcels and make more deliveries in the afternoon. That creates a huge amount of challenges on its own in terms of restructuring something as complex as a parcel delivery operation that's delivering, as I say, 250 to 280 million parcels a year, and an increasing number, as I said in my opening remarks. You then sort of say, well, okay, but you can overcome that. You're a good logistics provider. You could do it. Yes, we can. But we have to do that in a targeted way. We can't just suddenly say, okay, we're going to 100% electric overnight. So we start with the most challenging areas. London would be one of those, where there are already a number of ultra-low emission zones, and some other important cities following suit, such as Oxford and Cambridge in the UK. And I should also call out Manchester as well. So it's looking at putting these new operational processes on our range of our fleet of all electric vehicles into those areas to make those emission-free deliveries in city centre sites. But we want to do a lot more. In 2020 we've managed to get to 10% of our fleet to be all electric emission-free. That's an amazing achievement. Again, not wish to blow our own trumpet, it's an amazing achievement because those electric vehicles are considerably more expensive than their diesel counterparts, 2 to 3 times the cost. They're also in incredibly short supply. It's not as if they're there, it's not as if they're commercially viable, really, as a product. It's not as if there's lots of manufacturers competing and offering us lots of different vans. So the challenges, even to get to 10%, have been immense, Aid. And we're trying to use our communications and marketing methods, not necessarily to attract new customers or even make the consumers we deliver to more aware of what we do. We're using our marketing and communications cloud to try and speak to government and vehicle manufacturers to say, hey, aside from residential cars, and private individuals' cars and electric mobility in day-to-day transport. There's a commercial angle to all this as well. And perhaps that's getting increasingly important now. We need government to make it easier for manufacturers to bring these new vehicles to the market. We need manufacturers to make a more diverse range and a more affordable range. And we need those things quickly if we're going to meet the challenges that we face. I think a final point to make in my opening remarks is that as we've seen a huge surge towards online shopping, some people are saying, well, that means more delivery vans on the road. Well, yes, it does, but it also means far fewer private cars on the road. So people aren't going out to retail centres, people aren't going out on runs to the shops, people are having more and more of their food delivered to home, people having more of their clothing, kids items, DIY, etc., delivered to homes. One delivery van, can save maybe 200 private car journeys in the area. And if we can make those vans and more of those vans all electric, emission-free vehicles, then you really can start to deliver a sustainability benefit. And I think that is, what we want to use our marketing and communications power to, is to create awareness of those messages and to encourage government, manufacturers and infrastructure providers to give us more choice at more affordable prices.
Very good. Thanks very much indeed for those opening remarks, Tim. It seems to me that you've got a whole bunch of audiences that you need to communicate with. You've got government, you've got the internal people that work internally at DPD to encourage them to transition to electric vehicles. You've got the consumers on the doorstep, and you've got the businesses that you work with. So there's a whole bunch of audiences. What would you say your main target is amongst those perhaps four audiences? Is it government? Is it consumers on the doorstep? Is it the businesses you're working with? Which one would you say is the most important, or are you working across all of them?
No, I think it's very easy for me to answer that question. Our number one audience, as you would perhaps expect me to say, is our customers, the people that pay us to carry their goods for them. And as a commercial entity, you have to keep in mind that our customers are our lifeblood. If we don't have customers, we don't have revenue. We can't invest that revenue in our infrastructure growth and in our response to sustainability. So the customers will always be the number one audience for me. They are our shipping customers, who are, amongst the UK's leading retailers and e-retailers, are very interested in being more sustainable. They're working themselves on things like better packaging, more recycling, circular economy issues, and they want to hear from their service providers, companies like DPD, about how we're being more environmentally friendly as well. So of course they support it. Our second audience then really is to their customers, the consumers that we deliver to. We want them to know, for example, that we're coming to them on emission-free electric delivery. So we've taken the time to invest in the technology. DPD have built its reputation on giving great information to the parcel receivers. So we were the first company to say, we'll be delivering to you in 1 hour. You can track your driver to your door down to a 15-minute time slot. We were the first company to say, oh, by the way, your driver's called Peter and he's a West Ham fan. And there's a few background details just so you know who's coming to your house and that you have a great experience when he drops off at your doorstep. Now we're telling our consumers increasingly that, by the way, Pete is coming today on an all-electric vehicle, and it will be an emission-free delivery. We call that our green notification. That's been a very important marketing tool because we know from the likes and the feedback we get, for example, through our app and our social media channels, that consumers love that. We also see it on the street, so where we have electric vehicles operating in urban areas, particularly towards the back end of last year and the early end of this year, we had some new and very innovative looking delivery vehicles out there. People stopping drivers in the street and asking them about the vehicle. So much so that we got to the point in London where we had to issue our drivers with little leaflets and flyers to hand out to interested members of the public to say, look, no, I'm really sorry, you can't get in and have a go. I am a working parcel delivery driver here, but here's some information on my car, on my vehicle, on my van, on my electric van, and what DPD are doing in this area. But of course, as I said earlier, once we've addressed those audiences, we do have some new audiences for us. That's all the people that we're talking to today, because we want all our friends in the whole sustainability community, sort of people that have come to join our event today. We want them to be aware that it isn't just about private individuals switching to perhaps a diesel car to electric car. There's a huge commercial side to all of this, where business can also be greener, and a business like DPD's that wants to be greener and has the ability to invest in being greener needs the support of all this community to increase the awareness of the issue, to increase the awareness that there is a lack of choice from manufacturers. There's certainly a lack of right-hand drive vehicles in Europe, which is a particular problem for us here in the UK, and that we all need, more competition around, and coordination perhaps as well as competition around infrastructure, charging points, etc., so that we can all become greener. Both the man in the street and the woman in the street driving their private car, but also business users out and about, for example, making parcel collections and deliveries. So multiple audiences, Aid.
Very good. Thanks very much indeed, Tim. I'll open up questions now to the online audience, if I may. And there's an interesting question about communication to your own employees. There's a big transition going on here. They've had a certain vehicle, a combustion vehicle, for 100 years, and now suddenly there's a whole new vehicle type, an electric vehicle. So what do you do to communicate to your drivers and your other internal employees around the transition to electrification?
Well, we have a large internal communications function in the company. As you expect, we're a company of 15,000 people and growing by another 3,000 people joining us at the end of the year. So induction, communication, ongoing engagement is a very important area for us. And with the drivers, they are very interested in the type of vehicles that come in. We have a number of people that drive for us as employees, and a number of people who are franchised drivers who work out and about collecting and delivering parcels on the street, on the high street, and door to door to the sort of residential addresses that I talked about earlier on. Now, lots of those drivers would elect to provide their own van. It's obviously delivered in DPD, but to operate their own franchise, they would often buy their own van. And it didn't take long at all for us to say to people, we can provide an electric vehicle, but it is going to cost more. So we funded that to a number of franchise drivers who expressed an interest. Otherwise, it just would have been, frankly, unaffordable to them. But in terms of getting the message to them and offering them the electric vehicle package, that was very quick, and people saw the benefit of it straight away. I think your own social media assets will show. We've canvassed a few of our drivers who were very quick to say, yes, I've got an electric vehicle. As I add more routes to my franchise, I will get more electric vehicles. But it's, again, as I said earlier on, we would like more of our own electric vehicles as well. We would like to expand our fleet from the current number of 700 to many, many more. But if the availability isn't there and the prices don't become more comparable with the alternative fuel vehicles, then it's going to be difficult to keep the rate of change as quick as we can. The problem isn't communicating with the drivers or the drivers adapting. Drivers adapt very quickly. The drivers adapted in COVID, for example, almost immediately from making the traditional delivery that we've had for many years, getting a signature for a parcel, to introducing a contact-free delivery process. Drivers can adapt very quickly. The drivers can adapt very quickly to the new types of vehicles. They're not at all sentimental or nostalgic about the diesel engine. They prefer the electric vehicles. They're quieter, they're nicer to drive. And also, as they get more advanced with longer, what we call STEM mileages, or battery life, they're getting increasingly popular. The issues are, as I've said, around availability and affordability, And that's really the message that we've got for everybody here today, and for the manufacturers and the people involved in the provision of these vehicles.
Very good. Another question has come in, something you touched on earlier, saying, have you noticed a positive response from customers on the doorstep to seeing DPD delivered electric vans delivering their parcel?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We see that coming through all the time, whether it's messages posted on our website or social media assets, or just the drivers, being asked to stand by their photograph, or people take a picture of it and post it on Facebook, all sorts of things. As I mentioned earlier on, when we opened our first sort of micro delivery site in the city of Westminster, and we operated our Paxter vehicle. And for those of you who haven't seen the Paxter vehicle, it kind of looks like a cross between a delivery van and a golf buggy, very space age type vehicle. And this was literally how people stopping our drivers in the street to ask about the vehicle and to understand where it came from. And we're equally with the cargo bikes that we operate in London and other city centres. That does attract a lot of interest at the doorstep for sure, but also while they're in transit between door-to-door deliveries, people will just stop or pull up alongside the lights and ask questions. So we see that all the time. There's definitely lots of interest in the electrification. I think people still turn their heads now when they're driving along and they see an all-electric vehicle, a car, for example. I'm not going to call out any individual manufacturers, but whenever I see one go past or don't hear one drive past me, I say, oh wow, that's an electric car, that's great. Some nice looking vehicles. Don't make the noise that diesel and petrol make as well. And that's exactly the same when it comes to parcel delivery. It's a standout occasion still when an electric vehicle arrives on your driveway or your doorstep as opposed to a diesel. And what we're trying to do is make that the opposite, so that the electric delivery is the norm.
Thanks so much indeed, Tim. Tim, thanks so much for that inspirational overview of the marketing communication side of DPD, and a personal thanks from me for DPD engaging early on with World EV Day and becoming a founding partner. I thank you very much indeed for that. Some exciting news through from central government today. There is some new investment, I think £9 million of investment in the electric vans side. So that's some good news. And the Department for Transport made that announcement specifically on World EV Day. So that's all good news. So Tim, thanks so much indeed. Stick around for the next speaker and have in mind some questions to your fellow panelists at the end. So I'd like to move on now, please, to our final speaker, and that is Roni Dvir, who is the head of marketing at Drives, a very different kind of business to the ones we've been speaking to so far. Drives is a software company in the charging infrastructure space. And Roni, I'm delighted to have you join us today. As with the other speakers, I'd like to start off, please, by asking you to give us some opening insights into your work at Drives, particularly with a marketing frame of reference. So please do join us and tell us about your work in marketing at Drives.
Thank you, Ed. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to join World EV Day marketing panel. I'm excited to be here on the ground floor in an industry that is changing all aspects of the world. So just a few words about Drives in favor of those who don't really know us. So Drives empowers major service providers that aspire to take a more significant role in the e-mobility landscape with a market-leading end-to-end EV charging and energy management software platform. And since founding Drives, our core focus was on providing digital services software platform to major players in the EV domain, like charge point operators, e-mobility service providers, utilities, and gas and oil, and basically enable them to provide EV charging services to their customers. Currently, the Drives platform serves as, you can say, the operating system for the largest EV charging network operators around the world, managing tens of thousands of chargers, hundreds of thousands of chargers, with roaming over 21 countries throughout North and South America, Europe and Asia, including global industry players like Centrica, EVgo, Iladin Enel, ESB, and more. And I think that from a marketing perspective, I couldn't agree more with what Amber said earlier, that I think that there's a critical role for us as marketing guys to build awareness and educate the market, not just from an EV driving perspective, but also from EV charging perspective, because I think that there are a lot of anxieties from this perspective, but because people don't know enough about the chargers availability and what they can expect when they are speaking about charging experience. And it's our here, and we are here to better educate them and on what's possible for them, and get this risk, perceived risk, lowered.
Thank you very much indeed, Roni, for those opening thoughts. So, I mean, your work primarily is, I assume, to communicate to other businesses. You're a business-to-business company, but you've touched on a number of issues there in relation to wider consumer education. Do you touch on that at all in your work?
So I do believe that our B2B marketing messages, I would call it, are also always in mind of a B2B2C. I mean, we're always look at the end consumer or the end customer of our customers. For example, there seem to be a range of anxieties stopping people from buying EVs right now. And one significant complaint is lack of infrastructure. And also there's a major concern that if the infrastructure does exist, it isn't working properly. So how can marketing can help combat these anxieties? So when I'm building our marketing messages, this is always in mind for me. And yes, we are seeing an exponential growth in the number of EVs on the road, and we expect more than 100 million EVs by 2025. But the EV charging infrastructure needs to accommodate both growth, as McKinsey, for example, projects 42 million chargers by 2030. But there's also a wide range of charging behaviors we need to address. And consumers will only switch to EV if there are widespread charging points out there, which are easily accessible and they can charge at appropriate speed. For example, according to ZapMap, the number of charging devices in the UK is currently just over 19,000. However, electric car charging stations are dramatically falling behind demand. So obviously, in order to meet market demand, a significant investment in charging infrastructure is still needed. Having said that, EV drivers need to know that they can charge anytime, anywhere, and EV charging operators and eMobility service provider can accelerate their market leadership by both growing their charging infrastructure, but also delivering an exceptional charging experience. Drivers really need to know that the technology is in place to ensure network stability, and the tech is there, the technology is there, but I guess that there is still a way to go from a driver's awareness perspective. And what I mean is that we as marketing need to convey messages that will lower the perceived risk and address the range anxieties. And our marketing role here is to ensure that EV drivers pre and post purchase are they fully understand what they're getting and what they can expect.
Thanks very much, Roni. And tell us more about your kind of core work in marketing, which I guess is talking to leading businesses, charging infrastructure businesses, and other similar businesses. What's your challenge in terms of communicating your work to other businesses in the eMobility sector?
So I guess it's what differentiates us, or talking about our core business, which is purely software. Okay, this is what we do, and this what differentiates us, and we enable these players, again, traditional, I would call it, like charge point operators and e-mobility service providers, but also utilities and gas and oil, to move into the EV industry. And what this means is making them, building confidence, that we are able to provide them with the software platform which will enable them to provide stable and network, and make their chargers like 100% available, and help them with self-service tools to their drivers, with which their drivers can actually ensure they know where the chargers are, and and ensure that the chargers are up and running, and they don't get into a situation in which they get to a charger and it's not working. So ensuring that these players basically understand the technology which is now in place, which will enable them, again, to optimize their operations, monetize their networks, make money out of it, right? This is what we're here for, and provide their drivers with great digital experience, which they all expect.
Very good. Thanks so much indeed. I'll open up to some questions from our online audience now. So Penny from the United States asks an interesting question. She says, it seems that your work is communicating a kind of life support system for the charging infrastructure sector. Is that how you perceive it?
Yes, so life-saving is a very interesting term to use. We call it a back-end system, okay? So basically the end customer, the EV driver, does not know that, that this system is powered by drives. So basically, yes, we are providing our software platform to the EV ecosystem players, as I mentioned earlier. And they are using, for example, our platform to provide self-service tools like mobile apps or web portals, which contain all the information that EV driver would need, like a charger availability and spots of interest. They will be able to navigate to a charger. They'll be able to see what the transactions are, their billing history, and so forth.
Very good. Thanks for that. A final question from the online audience, and then I'll open up questions between you and your fellow panelists. Paul Smeltzers asks, what would be a good digital way to let people experience EV? I guess he's asking that question in the context of not being able to meet at physical events this year. So do you have any ideas in mind for digital ways of engaging audiences? Perhaps something core to your work. Perhaps that's more of a question for me. Something that I should maybe consider in my work, and I do consider that question. I think one of my own solutions, one of my own answers to that questions was to set up World EV Day. So maybe I can be the person to answer that question. And here's another question. Joanna Filgado asks about the future of super high-speed 800-volt charging infrastructure, and what would be the marketing communications messages to help communicate that super high-speed charging infrastructure?
So I guess that the companies who are marketing to end consumers, so we'll talk about the advantages of being able to fast charge. But us, as a software platform for EV charging networks, we will obviously take the discussion and speak about energy management optimization. because once networks are built to provide enormous amounts of power in short period of times, that this is essential to have energy management systems in place which be intelligent enough to load balance the energy and make sure that there are no like blackouts, and drivers get the power they need when they need it and where they need it.
Very good. Well, thanks very much indeed, Roni, for your super insightful ideas around marketing communications and the e-mobility sector. I'll now ask questions of for each of the other panelists. So I believe that you had a question for Roni, for Poppy at Go Ultra Low about some of the OEMs like Audi, BMW and Nissan being members of Go Ultra Low, and you were asking Poppy if she could speak a bit about your partnerships at Go Ultra Low with those major industry players and how it impacts EV adoption. So Poppy, that question to you from Roni.
So yeah, since Go Ultra Low's inception, we've always worked with the major vehicle manufacturers in the UK. Our model actually changed about a year ago. So when Go Ultra Low was first set up, vehicle manufacturers would we would essentially put a business case to them, and they would decide whether they wanted to join Go Ultra Low for a fee, which we obviously put towards our marketing communications campaign, and that fee was matched by government. It's slightly different now in that any vehicle manufacturer who produces or other sells a fully electric vehicle in the UK and therefore receives the plug-in car grant for that vehicle is automatically signed up to Go Ultra Low as part of that contract. So what's good about that for us is that it means that we now represent almost, not quite, but almost all of the major manufacturers operating in the UK. And in terms of how that helps from a consumer messaging point of view, one of the most sort of popular, if you like, messages that we put out and most surprising for consumers is are those around the number of models that are available and what those models are. I think, now we're at over 100 different EV models on the market in the UK. And if you tell a consumer that, they're absolutely gobsmacked in an absolutely positive way. And so working directly with all of those manufacturers really helps us to put out those messages, but then also for us to showcase all the brilliant cars that there are available. We use them in all our comms, our advertising, a lot of those sort of PR activities that I was talking about, and at events. So yeah, for us, working directly with all of those manufacturers is really, really helpful. I think that's what the question was.
Yep. Thanks very much indeed, Poppy. You're very popular amongst your fellow panelists. There's another question to you from Amber, and it's simply, do you work with social media influencers?
Yes, we do. And I think I saw there was another question about this. Yes, not a huge number, and actually it's probably an area we'll probably look to expand on going forward, but we do work with sort of some celebrity ambassadors, and we use them via their social media channels. So we work primarily with Ben Fogle, who I'm sure particularly people dialing in from the UK will know very well, and the way that he sort of helps us is that he has very good sustainability, environmental credentials. For example, he also has a really big audience here in the UK. He's a very sort of popular character, so working with him just helps us to quite easily reach his audiences and an audiences who probably are likely to be quite interested in the world of EVs, because they probably are in some way interested in kind of environmental or sustainability subjects. So yeah, he's the main person we work with, but we work with others as well, some sort of specifically in the EV space, or particularly when we're doing media partnerships, we might work with some other celebrities as well.
Very good. In my previous life at the BBC, I also worked with Ben Fogle, and I saw how powerful an influence he had over certain audiences in my work with him. Poppy, I understand you had a question for Amber at ABB about how perhaps consumer concerns in the US and the UK are different. So perhaps, Amber, you could maybe, through your global understanding of the difference between UK and US audiences, address that question for Poppy and for the rest of our audience, please.
So actually, when I saw that question pop up, I did a quick search and found that the average distance, or the longest distance between two charge points in the US is 119 miles. And in the UK, I think it's like 47 miles. So yeah, probably there is a bigger concern among Americans about the distance, but the important thing we need to communicate always is, for example, I think the lowest range on electric cars, the latest electric cars, is 150 miles. So even in the US case, the longest distance shouldn't be a problem. The other thing that I noticed when I was mentioning that you can find a lot of information about how people are thinking when you read their comments in response to blogs about EVs or news releases. And one of the things that came up a couple of times there was the lack of electric trucks. And I don't know too much about the demand for trucks in general in the UK, but in the US there are lots of truck drivers. So I think this is probably also maybe one area of difference that you see, that more Americans are driving trucks and bigger cars.
Very good. Thanks very much indeed for that, Amber. Poppy, I understand you had a question for Tim at DPD. So Tim, hopefully you're still there and can engage with this one. So Poppy is asking you, Tim, do electric vans help encourage new customers at all? Is it effective PR in and of itself? Poppy asks.
Yes, but and I'll pick up with further questions that come in from members of the audience as well about is it economically viable, or are vehicles really 2 to 3 times the cost, and is it about availability or affordability? I think to answer both sets of questions, first of all, I would say yes, customers like it. But customers fundamentally are paying us to deliver parcels, okay? That's product that they've sold. What I think we all have to keep in mind here is, that in the world that DPD operates in, it's a highly competitive commercial business. So while we would, love to wave a wand and make everything green, and all the consumers we deliver to, yes, would love it, and all the customers that we deliver on behalf of would love it as well. When you flip the coin around, in the harsh reality of the commercial world, you have to be able to do that profitably, but you have to be able to do it cost effectively on behalf of your customers. And at the moment, there is no ducking the issue from our point of view. There is not the availability or the affordability of these vehicles commercially. They are, at the very least, twice what we would pay for a diesel vehicle. And as those vehicles get bigger, that can rise up to 3 times the cost. So we have issues on both sides. But yes, and this is why our message remains, if we're able to persuade more manufacturers to collaborate, if we're able to get more startups in the market, if we're able to get more government support, if the vehicles become more available, we will accelerate more the whole electric fleet, because yes, to answer your question directly, the customers do like it. Will they pay for it? Will parcel shippers pay premiums to get their goods delivered on electric vehicles? Sadly, no. And while our audiences here may all feel, that to us electrification and emission-free is one of our primary drivers, perhaps in this environment we're talking in here, that is not necessarily experienced in the wider world, certainly not in the wider commercial world. And I think we all have a job to do to persuade people that, it was a few years ago we realised it was worth paying a little bit more, possibly not to have GM food, possibly pay a little bit more for humanely farmed food. Now I think we have a big message to try and persuade people to, look, we need to pay a little bit more to have clean, green, emission-free delivery. But maybe we can supersede that message if we all pull together and those electric vehicles become more affordable and more available, and we'll be able to adopt them quicker. As I say, to come back to, at the end of the day, yes, of course, everybody wants it. The consumers want it and the customers want it, but it has to be, to use that old expression, economically, or really, I should say, commercially viable, not just for DPD, but for the customers that pay us to ship their goods for them.
I think we can assume there then, Tim, that there's still a lot of work for us all to do in the marketing communications world to bring out there.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And we are, as I would say again, extremely proud to have reached the 10% of our fleet figure. And, you know, that may not seem like a huge number to a lot of people, but it makes us, it certainly gives us the largest percentage of green vehicles in the UK for a parcel delivery fleet. And as I say, we will accelerate that growth and continue to lead the way as and when we can get the vehicles. But yes, I think as a marketing community, we've got a bit more to do yet before we've reached the place where we want to get to. But I think events like today and coming together and having the discussion and creating awareness and what everybody will now do to cascade it all helps enormously.
I think the good news there for us all, for the rest of us on the panel, from you there, Tim, is that we're all very firmly in a job for the foreseeable future, working to communicate eMobility to all of our respective audiences. I guess we all, perhaps within the eMobility echo chamber, forget that this is a very new industry, a fast-growing industry, and there's lots of work to do to engage audiences, to deliver understanding to audiences. So, Tim, thanks very much indeed for your excellent contribution, and to everybody else, to Poppy from Go Ultra Low, to Roni from Drives, to Amber, our headline partner at World EV Day at ABB, and to Simona from the ABB Porsche Formula E race team. I hope you have enjoyed this discussion online. Thanks very much indeed for your questions. And I will just finish off by wishing our panel and our online audience a happy World EV Day. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.